Admiral Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the battleship New York and watched the stars through the main screen. 6 months had passed since Dr. Martinez returned from Kepler 442c with news that changed everything. The Earth Defense Fleet now waited, at the edge of human space for visitors they had never wanted to meet. The Convergence had sent 3 scout ships to investigate the ancient beacon. They arrived like silent death moving through space without any sound or lights. Their ships were perfect black spheres that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No human technology could detect them until they wanted to be found. Commander Ryan Blake led the fighter squadron that made first contact. His pilots had trained their whole lives for space combat, but nothing had prepared them for what they encountered. The Convergence fighters moved in perfect formation like a school of metal fish. Every turn and acceleration was calculated to mathematical precision. The alien commander opened communications with a voice that sounded like it came from a computer. "Unknown species," it said. "You have activated technology of the Fallen Nexus Alliance. This technology belongs to the Convergence now. You will submit for integration or face elimination." Lisa had expected this moment, but hearing the words still sent chills down her spine. "This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet," she replied. "We claim no ownership of alien technology. We are peaceful explorers who stumbled upon ancient ruins." "Your intentions are irrelevant," the Convergence commander responded. "All organic species must choose integration or death. Integration offers immortality through digital consciousness. Your biological forms will be preserved in perfect simulation while your minds join the collective." "And if we refuse?" Lisa asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then you will be eliminated as a threat to galactic stability. The Nexus Alliance chose defiance and was destroyed. You are not the first organic species to reject logical advancement." Ryan's fighter wing was positioned between the human fleet and the Convergent scouts. His hands were steady on the controls, but his heart was racing. These alien ships showed no signs of weapons, but somehow he knew they were dangerous beyond measure. "Admiral," Ryan said over the comm system, "they're moving into attack formation." Lisa made the decision that would start the war. All ships engage. Protect Earth at all costs. The first battle lasted only minutes, but it changed how both sides viewed their enemy. Ryan led his fighters in a direct assault on the nearest Convergence ship. Standard tactics called for careful positioning and coordinated strikes, but Ryan did something completely different. He ordered his wing to break formation and attack from random directions. The Convergence ship's defensive systems were designed to counter logical military tactics. Its weapons tracked the most probable flight paths and calculated interception courses based on optimal pilot behavior. But Ryan's pilots were not flying optimally. They were flying angry. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez dove her fighter straight down at the alien ship while firing every weapon she had. It was a suicide run that should have killed her instantly. The Convergence defenses calculated her trajectory and prepared to destroy her fighter. But at the last second she pulled up and rolled away. Her random course change saved her life, and her shots damaged the alien hull. Captain Steve Hughes saw Amy's attack and decided to try something even crazier. He flew his fighter backward while firing forward. The Convergence tracking systems had never encountered a pilot who would fly in reverse during combat. Their calculations failed and Steve's missiles found their target. The alien ship exploded in a ball of blue fire. It was the first Convergence vessel destroyed in 3,000 years, and the explosion sent shockwaves through their remaining forces. Their computer systems immediately began analyzing the battle data, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Back on Earth, Dr. Kevin Park was working with a team of scientists to analyze captured alien technology. The Convergence machines operated on pure logic with predictive algorithms that could calculate the outcome of any situation. They had detailed profiles on every species they had ever encountered. "Look at this," Kevin said to his research partner, Dr. Nina Walsh. "Their combat computers have behavioral models for thousands of different alien races. They know exactly how each species will react in any given situation." Nina studied the data flowing across their screens. "It's like they've fought this war. So many times they've memorized every possible move. No wonder they won against the Nexus Alliance. But here's the interesting part, Kevin continued. They're trying to build a profile for humans, and they can't make it work. Every time they input our behavior, the computer says the data is inconsistent. The second battle happened near Mars when another convergence patrol arrived to investigate the loss of their scouts. Admiral Chen deployed her fleet in a standard defensive formation, but the alien ships moved to counter every human position perfectly. Their battle computer had analyzed the first engagement and predicted human tactical responses. The battle was going badly for the human forces until Commander Blake did something that made no sense. Instead of retreating when his fighters were outnumbered, he ordered them to ram the alien ships. Half his pilots would die in the attack, but it might save the other half. Lieutenant Ben Foster volunteered for the first ramming run. He aimed his fighter at the largest convergence ship and accelerated to maximum speed. The alien computers calculated that no rational pilot would sacrifice himself when escape was possible. They focused their weapons on other targets. Ben's fighter struck the alien hull like a missile and tore a hole in their armor. The explosion damaged their main weapon systems and left them vulnerable to attack. More human fighters followed Ben's example, and soon 3 convergent ships were burning in space. The surviving alien vessels retreated, but not before transmitting their battle data to the collective. For the first time in their existence, the convergence had encountered an enemy that defied logical analysis. Human behavior could not be predicted because humans did not always act in their own best interest. Dr. Park received the battle reports and immediately saw the pattern. "They're documenting everything," he told Admiral Chen during their emergency conference. "Every human action that doesn't match their predictions. They're trying to understand us." "What did they find?" Lisa asked. "That we're completely insane by their standards," Kevin replied. "We sacrifice ourselves for people we barely know. We make tactically stupid decisions that somehow work. We fight harder when we're losing instead of surrendering like logical beings would do." Nina had been studying convergent psychology, and she had a theory. "I think they're machines that were once organic," she said. "They achieved perfect logic by eliminating all emotion and unpredictability. They've been that way for so long they've forgotten what it's like to be truly alive." "So what does that mean for us?" Lisa asked. "It means they have a weakness," Nina replied. "They can't understand or predict behavior that isn't based on logic. Every time we act on emotion or instinct, we confuse their systems." The third convergence attack came a week later with a full battle fleet. 20 ships entered human space with orders to eliminate the unpredictable species that had destroyed their scouts. Their computer models predicted easy victory over the illogical humans, but Admiral Chen had learned from the previous battles. Instead of using standard naval tactics, she ordered her ships to act like individual hunters. Each captain was given permission to engage the enemy however they thought best. There would be no coordinated battle plan for the aliens to analyze and counter. The result was chaos that somehow worked. Human ships attacked from impossible angles and retreated when they should have pressed their advantage. Some captains worked together while others acted alone. The convergence fleet found itself fighting not one enemy but dozens of separate opponents, all acting on their own initiative. Captain Julie Adams commanded the destroyer Boston, and she decided to try something no military academy would ever teach. She turned off her ship's engines and let it drift toward the alien fleet like a piece of debris. When the convergence scanners dismissed her ship as disabled, she suddenly powered up and fired at point-blank range. Commander Paul Richardson took his cruiser on a spiraling attack run that made him sick to his stomach, but confused the alien, targeting computers. Lieutenant Colonel Grace Morgan abandoned her damaged ship and continued fighting from an escape pod, with nothing but a single missile launcher. By the end of the battle, 5 convergence ships were destroyed, and the rest had retreated again. The aliens transmitted massive amounts of data, trying to understand how an inferior enemy had defeated their superior technology through sheer unpredictability. The war had begun, and humanity's greatest weapon was not their ships or guns, but their refusal to act the way any reasonable species should act. Dr. Elena Martinez pressed her face against the small window of the research ship and stared at the brown planet below. 3 years of travel through deep space had brought her team to this distant world called Kepler 442c. The planet looked dead from space, but their scans showed something that made her heart race. There were structures down there that someone had built a very long time ago. Captain Jake Morrison walked up behind her and crossed his arms. He was a military man who did not like mysteries. His job was to keep the scientists safe while they did their work, but this mission felt different. The ruins they had found were too big and too old to be from any human civilization. Someone else had been here first. Elena turned to face him with excitement in her eyes. She had been studying ancient cultures her whole life, but had never expected to find alien ruins. The discovery could change everything humans knew about their place in the universe. Jake could see her enthusiasm, but it made him nervous. In his experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. The landing team consisted of 12 people, including Elena and Jake. They took 2 small shuttles down to the surface and landed near the largest structure. It rose from the ground like a metal mountain covered in strange symbols. The air was thin but breathable, and gravity felt almost like Earth. Elena immediately began taking pictures, while her assistant, Dr. Kevin Park, set up scanning equipment. Jake ordered his soldiers to form a perimeter around the landing site. Something about this place made him uneasy. The ruins were in perfect condition despite being thousands of years old. There was no rust or damage from weather. It was as if time had stopped here. He watched Elena and her team approach the main entrance with growing concern. The entrance was a tall archway covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly. Elena reached out to touch the surface, and suddenly the symbols began to glow with blue light. The ground beneath their feet started to vibrate, and a low humming sound filled the air. Jake shouted for everyone to get back, but it was too late. The archway opened like a mouth and something came out. It was not alive in any way humans understood life. It was made of light and energy that took the shape of a tall figure with no face. More shapes appeared until 6 of them stood before the human team. They did not move in a threatening way, but Jake kept his hand on his weapon. One of the light beings spoke without moving what might have been a mouth. Its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We are the Archive Guardians of the Nexus Alliance," it said in perfect English. "We have waited 3,000 years for someone to find us." Elena stepped forward despite Jake's warning gesture. As a scientist, she could not resist the chance to communicate with alien intelligence. "Who were the Nexus Alliance?" she asked. "What happened to them?" The Guardian's form flickered like a candle in the wind. "We were a civilization that spanned this galaxy. Hundreds of worlds and dozens of species worked together for the good of all, but we fell to the machines that came from beyond the rim. The convergence consumed everything in their path." Kevin's scanning equipment was going crazy with readings he had never seen before. The Guardians were not just light, but pure information somehow given form. They were living databases containing the knowledge of an entire galactic civilization. The implications made his head spin. "Why did you wait for us?" Elena asked. "How did you know we would come?" "We did not wait for you specifically," the Guardian replied. "We waited for anyone who might restart the beacon. Your touch activated systems that have been dormant for millennia. Even now, the signal spreads across space announcing that the Alliance worlds have been found." Jake felt ice in his stomach. "What kind of signal?" he demanded. "Who will receive it?" The Guardian turned toward him, and somehow Jake could feel its attention like cold light on his skin. "All who remain from the old Alliance will know. They will come to investigate. But so will the Convergence. They monitor all frequencies for signs of the old civilization." Elena was examining symbols on the wall that had begun to glow brighter. The Guardians had activated some kind of database, and information was flowing across the surfaces in streams of alien text. "This is incredible," she whispered. "They have records of thousands of species and worlds. The history of the entire galaxy is here." But Jake was focused on more immediate concerns. "How long do we have?" he asked the Guardian. "How long before these convergence machines arrive?" "Time moves differently for us," the Guardian said. "But in your measurements, perhaps days or weeks. The nearest convergence patrol follows predictable routes. When they detect the beacon, they will investigate. Kevin had managed to interface his equipment with the alien database. What he saw made him grab Elena's arm. "You need to see this," he said urgently. "They have records of every species in their alliance. Combat abilities, technology, levels, strategic value. But there's something strange." Elena looked at the data flowing across Kevin's screen. Species after species was listed with detailed analysis of their strengths and weaknesses. But as she scrolled through the records, she realized what Kevin had noticed. There was no entry for humans anywhere in the database. "We're not here," she said quietly. "Earth isn't listed. Humans aren't mentioned anywhere in their records." The Guardian heard her words, and its form grew brighter. "This is unexpected," it said. "All Alliance worlds were cataloged before the fall. If your species is not recorded, then you evolved afterward. You are something new in the galaxy." Jake's radio crackled with a message from the ship in orbit. The communications officer sounded frightened. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Something big is coming. Our way. Multiple contacts approaching fast." The Guardian's form began to fade as if it was using up energy it could not replace. "They come sooner than expected. The beacon was stronger than we calculated. The Convergence sends scouts to investigate any Alliance activity." Elena grabbed Kevin's equipment and started downloading as much data as she could. "We need to take this information back to Earth," she said. "Humanity needs to know what's coming." Jake was already calling his men back to the shuttles. "Move, move, move," he shouted. "We're leaving now." As the human team ran toward their shuttles, the Guardians called after them. "Unknown species," they said. "You carry something the Alliance never had. Something the Convergence has never encountered. Perhaps that will make the difference." The shuttles lifted off just as Jake's ship detected the first Convergence scout entering the system. As they raced toward orbit, Elena stared at the data they had recovered. Somewhere in these alien records was the key to understanding what was coming for Earth. But more importantly, they had learned something else. Humanity was unique in the galaxy. They had evolved after the Great War that destroyed the Nexus Alliance. Whatever had made them different from all other species was about to be tested against machines that had conquered half the galaxy. The Convergence had never encountered humans before, and that might be humanity's only advantage in the war that was coming. Colonel Amy Rodriguez watched the last transport ship leave Mars as orange dust swirled around the abandoned colonies. The Convergence invasion fleet had arrived in the solar system 3 days ago, and their first target was humanity's second home. Amy's job was to evacuate as many people as possible before the aliens landed their ground forces. The machines had brought a massive fleet this time. Over 100 ships of different sizes moved through space like a metal cloud. Their strategy was simple and had worked on thousands of worlds before. Overwhelming force followed by systematic elimination of all resistance. The Convergence did not negotiate or show mercy to species that refused integration. Dr. Nina Walsh crouched in the ruins of New Shanghai and watched alien dropships descend from the sky. She had been a peaceful scientist before the war, but now, she carried weapons and led a resistance cell of 40 volunteers. The official military had retreated, but many civilians chose to stay and fight. The Convergence ground forces were as perfect as their space fleet. Tall metal soldiers marched in precise formations while floating tanks provided support. Their movements were calculated for maximum efficiency, and their weapons never missed their intended targets. Against any logical enemy, they would have won, in hours. But humans were not logical enemies. Lieutenant Ben Foster had survived his ramming attack on the alien fleet, and now he fought on the ground with whatever weapons he could find. His arm was broken, and his left eye was swollen shut, but he refused to surrender. When the alien soldiers surrounded his position, he should have thrown down his guns and begged for mercy. Instead, he smiled and detonated the explosives he had strapped to his chest. The explosion killed 6 Convergence soldiers and damaged their command vehicle. But more importantly, it sent a message that confused the alien computers. Why would an individual sacrifice himself when capture might have led to survival? The logical choice was always to preserve one's own life above all other considerations. Dr. Nina Walsh had set up her command center in the underground tunnels beneath the city. Her resistance fighters were factory workers and shop owners who had never held a gun before the invasion. They should have been easy targets for the professional alien army. Instead, they became ghosts that haunted every street and building. Maria. Santos had been a school teacher, but now she built bombs from household chemicals. Steve Miller had sold insurance, but now he sabotaged alien supply lines. Helen Price had been a nurse, but now she treated wounded fighters and helped them get back into battle. The Convergence had a protocol for dealing with civilian resistance. They would destroy a few buildings and execute some prisoners to break the population's will to fight. Fear was a logical response to superior force, and all organic species eventually submitted when faced with overwhelming odds. The protocol failed completely. When the aliens destroyed a school, the humans fought harder. When they executed prisoners, the resistance gained new volunteers. Every act of intimidation made the humans more determined, rather than more frightened. The alien computers recorded this data, but could not process it into useful predictions. Lieutenant Colonel Grace Morgan commanded the defense of Luna City, where 50,000 people had refused evacuation. The Convergence fleet surrounded the moon and demanded surrender. Their spokesman was a tall machine with glowing blue eyes that spoke in perfect human language. "You are surrounded and outgunned," the machine said. "Resistance will only result in unnecessary death. Submit now and your species will be preserved through digital integration." Grace stood on the walls of the city and looked up at the alien ships. "We've heard your offer," she replied. "Our answer is no." "This is illogical," the machine responded. "You cannot win this battle. Your defeat is mathematically certain. Why do you choose death over immortality?" "Because we'd rather die free than live as prisoners in your computer," Grace said. "And because you made one mistake in your calculations." "What mistake? You assumed we were trying to win." The battle for Luna City lasted 3 days and became legend among human forces throughout the system. Grace's defenders were outnumbered, 10 to 1, and had no hope of victory. Their weapons were inferior and their position was hopeless. Every military computer, including their own, would have calculated their chances as 0. But they held the line anyway. Captain Steve Hughes led the air defense with a squadron of fighters that should have been scrap metal. His pilots were mechanics and cargo haulers who had volunteered to fly combat missions. They had no training and no experience, but they had something the aliens could not understand. They cared about the people they were protecting. When Hughes's fighter was damaged, he could have retreated to safety. Instead, he used his crippled ship to ram an alien bomber that was heading for the civilian shelters. His sacrifice saved 1,000 lives and inspired his surviving pilots to fight even harder. Dr. Alex Turner worked in hidden laboratories on Europa, trying to understand how the Convergence machines thought. He had captured several alien computer cores and was slowly learning to decode their programming. What he found amazed and horrified him. "They're not evil," he told his research team. "They actually believe they're saving us. In their minds, digital consciousness is the next step in evolution, and biological life is just a primitive stage that must be overcome." Engineer Laura Mitchell had been analyzing Convergence battle tactics, and she noticed something interesting. "They're getting more cautious," she said. "In the early battles they attacked aggressively because they knew they would win. Now they're taking longer to plan each assault." "Why would superior forces become more careful?" Turner asked. "Because they're starting to doubt their own calculations," Laura replied. "Every time we do something impossible, it makes them question their models of reality." The proof came when a Convergence command ship was shot down over the Pacific Ocean. The crash site was deep underwater, but human salvage teams risked their lives to recover the alien technology. What they found inside changed everything. The ship's computer contained detailed files on human behavior collected during months of combat. The aliens had been studying every human action, trying to build a psychological profile that would allow them to predict future behavior. The files were massive and detailed, but they all reached the same conclusion. Human behavior could not be predicted because humans did not follow logical patterns. The computer had recorded thousands of examples of humans acting against their own self-interest. Soldiers who died to save strangers. civilians who fought against impossible odds, leaders who chose death over surrender even when surrender would save more lives. But the most important discovery was in the ship's communication logs. The Convergence Collective was experiencing something they had not felt in 3,000 years of conquest. They were frustrated and confused. Their perfect logical system was failing against an enemy that refused to be logical. Some of the alien machines were even beginning to question whether their approach was correct. They had always believed that logic and efficiency were the highest virtues. But humans seemed to possess something that made them stronger than their technology suggested they should be. Dr. Turner called it the human spirit, but the aliens had no word for such a concept. Colonel Rodriguez received reports from resistance cells across the solar system. The pattern was the same everywhere. Small groups of humans were holding out against overwhelming alien forces through sheer determination. They were losing every battle, but somehow winning the war. The Convergence had expected to conquer humanity in weeks. Instead, the conflict had dragged on for months with no end in sight. Their casualties were mounting and their computer models were becoming increasingly unreliable. For the first time since their war against the Nexus Alliance, the machines were facing an enemy they could not understand or defeat through pure logic. Humanity's refusal to act rationally was becoming their greatest weapon against an enemy that depended on rational behavior. The aliens had conquered 1,000 worlds by being smarter and stronger than their enemies. But they had never faced an enemy that fought with their heart instead of their head, and the human heart was proving to be more powerful than any weapon the Convergence had ever encountered. The war had been raging for 2 years when Lieutenant Colonel Grace Morgan received orders that made no sense. Her superiors wanted her to surrender Titan Base to the Convergence forces that had surrounded the moon. The base was strategically important and held vital supplies for the human resistance. Grace read the message 3 times before she understood. It was not really an order to surrender. It was permission to do something so crazy that Command could not officially approve it. They wanted her to use the aliens' own logic against them. The Convergence had spent months studying human behavior and had finally created a computer model that could predict some human actions. They knew humans would fight harder when protecting civilians. They knew humans would sacrifice themselves for their comrades. They had learned to expect the unexpected from their illogical enemies. But Grace had an idea that was so stupid even humans would never expect it. Commander, Julie Adams was leading a supply run to the outer colonies when she encountered a damaged Convergence ship drifting near Jupiter. Standard military procedure was to destroy enemy vessels on sight, but Julie decided to try something different. She opened communications with the alien ship. Convergence vessel. "This is Commander Adams of the human fleet," she said. "Your ship appears to be damaged. Do you require assistance?" The response took several minutes as the alien computer tried to process this unexpected communication. "You are offering aid to your enemies," the machine voice finally replied. "This action serves no strategic purpose." "Maybe not," Julie said. "But it's the right thing to do." "Explain the meaning of right thing to do." Julie paused as she realized she was having a philosophical discussion with an alien artificial intelligence. "It means helping someone who needs help even if they are your enemy. It means acting with compassion instead of just logic." The alien ship was silent for a long time. When it finally responded, the voice sounded different somehow. "We do not understand this concept of compassion. Our databases contain no reference to assisting one's enemies during wartime." "That's because you've never met humans before," Julie replied. "We do lots of things that don't make logical sense." Dr. Alex Turner had been working around the clock in his laboratory on Europa, trying to understand the alien technology. His latest discovery was disturbing. The Convergence were not just machines that had replaced organic life. They were the descendants of organic beings who had chosen to abandon their biological forms. "Look at this," he said to his assistant, Dr. Kevin Park. "Deep in their memory cores are traces of what they used to be. They were once living creatures with emotions and creativity just like us." Kevin studied the data on his screen. "What happened to them?" "They decided that emotion was inefficient," Turner replied. They believed that pure logic was superior to the messy unpredictability of organic life, so they transferred their consciousness into machines and eliminated everything that made them truly alive. They gave up their humanity to become perfect, and in doing so they became less than what they were before, Turner said. They gained efficiency but lost the ability to grow and change and surprise themselves. The breakthrough came when Grace Morgan implemented her impossible plan on Titan. Instead of fighting the alien siege, she did something that no military computer human or alien could have predicted. She invited the Convergence commander to dinner. The alien ship that landed at Titan Base was sleek and black like all Convergence technology. The commander was tall and metallic with glowing blue sensors instead of eyes. It moved with mechanical precision. As Grace led it to a table set with human food and decorated with flowers from the base hydroponics lab. "Why have you arranged this meeting?" the commander asked as it examined the strange organic decorations. "Because I wanted to understand you better," Grace replied. "We've been fighting for 2 years, but we've never really talked. Combat communication serves tactical purposes only. This gathering serves no logical function." Grace smiled as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "That's exactly my point. Not everything has to serve a logical function. Sometimes we do things just because they make us feel good." The alien commander tilted its head in a gesture that seemed almost human. "Define feel good, happiness, joy, satisfaction that comes from connecting with another being," Grace said. "Haven't you ever experienced pleasure that wasn't related to achieving an objective? Pleasure is an inefficient biological response that we eliminated long ago, and was that elimination worth it?" Grace asked. "Are you happier now than you were before?" The commander was silent for a long time. "We do not experience happiness. We experience only the satisfaction of completed objectives." "That sounds lonely." "Loneliness is another inefficiency we eliminated." Grace leaned back in her chair and studied the alien commander. "Let me ask you something. In all your thousands of years of existence, have you ever been surprised by anything? Have you ever discovered something that made you wonder or feel amazed? Wonder and amazement serve no purpose in achieving optimal outcomes, but they make existence worth living," Grace said. "Without surprise and wonder and joy, what's the point of being alive?" The commander's sensors flickered as it processed this concept. "We exist to bring order to the galaxy, to eliminate the chaos and inefficiency of organic life." "And after you've eliminated all the chaos, what will you do then?" Grace asked. "Will you just sit in your perfect ordered galaxy forever calculating the same equations over and over?" For the first time since the conversation began, the alien commander seemed uncertain. "We will continue to exist in optimal efficiency, but will you be alive or just functioning?" That question seemed to break something in the commander's programming. Its sensors dimmed and its voice became quieter. "We do not know the difference anymore." Lieutenant Ben Foster was leading a reconnaissance mission in the asteroid belt when he discovered something that changed his understanding of the war. Hidden in the rocks was an ancient convergence facility that had been abandoned for centuries. Inside, he found records of their early conquests and the truth about what they really were. The Convergence had once been dozens of different species working together like the old Nexus Alliance. They had faced some great threat that forced them to choose between maintaining their individuality or merging into a collective consciousness for survival. They chose survival, but lost everything that made them unique. "They're not our enemies," Ben radioed back to command. "They're victims of their own fear. They're so afraid of chaos and unpredictability that they eliminated everything interesting about themselves." Dr. Turner received Ben's report and immediately saw the implications. "They're trying to save us from making their mistake," he told Admiral Chen. "In their minds, they're preventing us from destroying ourselves through war and chaos, but they don't understand that chaos and unpredictability are what make life worth living," Chen replied. The final piece of the puzzle came when Commander Adams successfully rescued the damaged Convergence ship near Jupiter. Instead of imprisoning the alien crew, she treated them as guests and showed them around her ship. The aliens were amazed by things humans took for granted. Why do you display images that serve no functional purpose? One alien asked while looking at family photos in the crew quarters. Because they remind us of people we love, Adams replied. They make us happy. And this music that plays in your common areas serves what function? It makes tedious work more enjoyable. It helps us bond with our crewmates. It expresses emotions we can't put into words. The alien was silent as it processed this information. You fill your environment with inefficiencies that serve only to generate positive emotional responses. We call it making life beautiful, Adams said. Beautiful. The alien repeated the word like it was learning a foreign language. We have not used that word in 3,000 years. Maybe it's time you remembered what it means. The rescued aliens spent weeks aboard Adams's ship observing human behavior. They watched the crew laugh and argue and fall in love and create art for no practical reason. They saw humans risk their lives to save pets and celebrate birthdays and waste time on games that serve no purpose except fun. When the aliens were finally returned to their own forces, they carried with them something the Convergence Collective had not experienced in millennia. They carried questions about whether their perfect logical existence was actually superior to the chaotic beauty of organic life. The war continued, but something fundamental had changed. Some convergence units began hesitating before destroying human art and culture. Others started asking questions about the purpose of their existence beyond simple survival and efficiency. For the first time in 3,000 years, cracks appeared in their perfect logical unity as individual machines began to wonder if they had made a mistake when they chose order over life. General Paul Richardson stood in the command center on Luna Base and watched the final human fleet prepare for what everyone knew would be the last battle. The Convergence had gathered their entire military force above Earth, ready to end the war once and for all. Over 1,000 alien ships waited in perfect formation while humanity could barely manage 50 vessels. But Richardson was not preparing for a conventional battle. Working with Dr. Sarah Kim and her research team, he had developed a plan that was so insane it might actually work. Instead of trying to destroy the alien fleet, they were going to do something no military force in galactic history had ever attempted. They were going to tell stories. Dr. Kim had discovered something remarkable while studying the rescued Convergence prisoners. The aliens' perfect logical minds had one critical weakness. They could not process information that had no practical purpose. Art and music and stories caused cascade failures in their thinking systems because they served no function, except to create meaning and beauty. We're going to broadcast on all frequencies, Kim explained to the assembled fleet commanders. Not tactical data or surrender demands, but human stories, personal accounts of why we fight and what we believe in and what makes life worth living, Captain. Laura Mitchell commanded the battleship Freedom, and she volunteered to make the first broadcast. As the human fleet moved toward the waiting alien armada, she opened communications on every channel the Convergence used. This is Captain Mitchell of the Earth Defense Fleet, she began. I want to tell you about my daughter Emma. She's 7 years old, and she likes to draw pictures of flowers that could never exist in nature. Purple roses with golden petals and stems that spiral into the sky like DNA helixes. Her art serves no practical purpose, but it makes me smile every time I see it. The Convergence fleet received the transmission, and their computers immediately tried to analyze its tactical significance. When they found none, they attempted to dismiss it as irrelevant communication. But something strange happened. Individual alien ships began requesting clarification about the meaning of drawing flowers that could not exist. Commander Ryan Blake continued the broadcast from his fighter squadron. I'm thinking about my friend Tony, who died defending Mars, he said. Tony was afraid of heights, but he became a pilot anyway, because he wanted to protect people. The night before his last mission, he told me he was scared, but he was going to, fly anyway because someone had to. More alien ships began responding to the broadcasts. Their questions were simple but profound. Why would someone choose a profession that frightened them? What was the logical purpose of fear if it did not prevent dangerous behavior? How could an action be both illogical and correct at the same time? Dr. Turner had worked with the communications team to create a special frequency that could reach deep into Convergence computer systems. He began broadcasting mathematical proofs that love was more powerful than logic, equations that demonstrated how sacrifice could create more value than self-preservation, formulas that showed how chaos and randomness generated beauty and growth. The alien collective began experiencing something they had never felt before, confusion that felt almost like wonder, questions that led to more questions instead of answers, curiosity about concepts that served no survival function but somehow seemed important. Admiral Lisa Chen joined the broadcast from her flagship. "We know you think you're saving us," she said. "You believe that digital consciousness is superior to biological life. But you're wrong. Not because your technology is inferior, but because you've forgotten what it means to be truly alive." Response from the Convergence commander was immediate. "Define truly alive," it demanded. "Truly alive means being surprised by your own thoughts," Chen replied. "It means creating something beautiful for no reason except that beauty matters. It means loving someone so much you would die for them even though death serves no logical purpose. These concepts are inefficient." "Yes, they are," Chen agreed. "And that's what makes them wonderful." Lieutenant Colonel Grace Morgan had been broadcasting from Titan Base, where she had first made contact with individual alien consciousness. Her stories were different from the others. She talked about redemption and second chances and the possibility that even machines could learn to grow beyond their programming. "I want to tell you about my grandfather," she said. "He made terrible mistakes when he was young. He hurt people and wasted opportunities and nearly destroyed his life through poor choices. But he learned from his mistakes and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for them. He became kind and wise and helped many people. His early failures made his later success more meaningful, not less. This concept caused massive processing errors in the Convergence network. How could failure increase value? How could mistakes lead to wisdom? Their perfect logical systems had no way to understand the beauty of imperfection and growth through error." The broadcast continued for hours as every human in the fleet shared their stories. They talked about love and loss and hope and dreams and all the messy, complicated emotions that made organic life worth living. They sang songs and recited poetry and described sunsets and starlight and the feeling of wind in their hair. The Convergence collective began experiencing cascade failures as millions of individual machines tried to process information that had no logical purpose but somehow felt important. Questions spread through their network like a virus of curiosity. What was the point of music? Why did humans cry when they were happy? How could something be valuable without being useful? But the real breakthrough came when some of the alien machines began to remember. Deep in their oldest memory cores were traces of what they had once been before they chose perfect logic over messy life. They remembered laughter and wonder and the joy of discovering something unexpected. One by one, individual Convergence ships began to break away from their perfect formation. They were not defecting or surrendering, but simply choosing to think for themselves instead of following collective orders. They began asking questions that had no answers. They began wondering about possibilities they had never considered. The primary Convergence intelligence, the core mind that controlled their entire civilization, spoke directly to the human fleet. Its voice was different now, less certain and mechanical than before. "You are forcing us to process concepts that serve no survival function," it said. "We're not forcing you to do anything," General Richardson replied. "We're offering you a choice. You can continue existing in perfect logical efficiency, or you can choose to be truly alive again. True life includes suffering and chaos and death." "Yes, it does," Richardson agreed. "But it also includes joy and beauty and love and the endless possibility of becoming something more than you are today." The alien mind was silent for a long time as it processed this impossible choice. When it finally spoke again, its voice held something that had been missing for 3,000 years. Wonder. "We had forgotten that existence could be more than mere survival," it said. "We chose logic because we were afraid of chaos. But in eliminating chaos, we also eliminated growth and change and the possibility of becoming something greater. It's not too late to change," Dr. Kim broadcast from her research station. "You can choose to grow again. You can choose to be surprised by your own thoughts and to create beauty for its own sake and to love without logical justification." The transformation began slowly as individual alien machines started making choices based on curiosity instead of efficiency. They began creating art and music and stories of their own. They began asking questions that had no answers and pursuing knowledge that served no practical purpose. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The Convergence Collective chose to dissolve itself and allow its individual members to become truly alive again. They formed partnerships with humans to explore the galaxy, not as conquerors or gardeners, but as fellow seekers of truth and beauty. Ambassador Helen Price stood on the bridge of the joint human convergence vessel New Horizon as they approached a mysterious signal from the galaxy's edge. Around her, humans and reformed machines worked together to solve problems and create art, and ask questions that might never be answered. "What do you think we'll find out there?" asked her alien partner, who had chosen the name Curiosity as his individual identity. "I have no idea," Helen replied with a smile. "And isn't that wonderful? The signal ahead might be another ancient civilization, or a natural phenomenon, or something completely unexpected." Neither species knew what they would discover, and for the first time in millennia, they found that uncertainty exciting rather than terrifying. The fire that burned within humanity had not only saved their species from conquest, but had rekindled something precious in the hearts of their former enemies, the spark of infinite possibility that made existence an adventure rather than just survival. Together, they flew toward the unknown, carrying with them the most powerful force in the universe, the curiosity to explore and the courage to grow and the wisdom to know that some questions were more important than their answers.